Okay, well, I think we are going to get started. So good morning, everybody. Appreciate you joining us today. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that SAIT is situated on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. Today, the area encompasses the Indigenous people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So thank you for joining us. Great to have you here. As you all had the speaker bios in the invitation, we won't go through a very lengthy introduction, but I will make sure that we throw the LinkedIn profiles for all of our speakers into the chat, and you can certainly feel free to connect with them there. But as we go through, I'm just going to do a very quick introduction. So we have Andrea Cherkis from ClearPath Business here. Andrea, give us a wave, although you should be pretty easy to pick up. Jesse Tutt from Alberta Health Services, Matt Sentis from ATCO, and Andre Bourjac from Blue Prism. Great to have this panel here. I've gotten to know them over the past couple of weeks preparing. It's a great group. Very fortunate to have these individuals with us this morning. So I think you're going to get a lot out of this discussion on RPA. Just some housekeeping. We're going to run through a quick overview. We have some slides that the panelists would like to share to really set the stage. Then we'll proceed into a panel discussion. And following that, hopefully we'll have some time for your questions. Again, Laura Busis, who's our manager of digital adoption training here at SAIT, is going to be moderating the chat and the Q&A functions. So please, for any specific questions, do pop them into the Q&A. And behind the scenes, we have Leanne Davies, product manager, just support extraordinaire for this session, who's helping us also with some of the technical functions. So with that, I think we are going to get started, and we will turn it over to our panel to, I believe, Matt, you're leading us off on the slide deck here. So I will mute my line and over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Craig. So as Craig has mentioned, my name is Matthew Sentis. I am an RPA developer at ATCO, helping to kind of lead the RPA initiative, make sure that we're being successful and we're seeing the benefits of this new technology. So we're going to kind of do a bit of an intro here for about 10 minutes and try and make sure everyone has a good understanding of what RPA is before we dive too far into to some further discussion. So I'm going to kind of move a little quickly here. So please follow along. You can see on your screen there, what is robotic process automation? There's some terms at the bottom I encourage you to read. So an RPA digital worker resides on its own virtual computer and uses the same applications as its human coworkers to complete the same processes and tasks. So, RPA is a computer software, and you can install it on its own virtual machine. You can install it on your own desktop. Basically, the software has the ability to mimic human mouse movements, mouse clicks, keyboard strokes. And because of that, it's able to use the applications on a computer just like a person would. So you're able to build full processes and automate those processes. Typically, we see a higher accuracy of work with no downtime. The digital worker can work that 24 hours, lacks the human capacity to learn judgment. So RPA is kind of a section of artificial intelligence. However, there's no ability for the digital worker or the bot to make decisions to kind of clear out that gray area. Every process has to be very rule-based and strict and follow a flow. And we'll kind of get into that more in this intro here. And then it works side by side with human employees. So it can work on a employee desktop. It can work after hours. Employee can engage the first process, set it off, stuff like that. Leanne, if you can move to the next slide. So why choose RPA? Typically, time savings is one of the biggest benefits organizations are looking for, and a refocusing of the mindset to higher value added tasks. So you're saving your employees time by automating these processes, but they still work those 8 hours a day. So now they're relocating that time to the higher value added tasks. And that's really the biggest benefit of RPA. You want your employees looking at the results of the automated process, what decisions are being made at the end goal of this automated process, and what we're doing with this info, whether we're analyzing it further, we're reporting on it. So you're kind of trying to refocus the mindset of your employees when you're going down this path of RPA. A recent increased emphasis on efficiency and accuracy. So efficiency and accuracy has always been a benefit of RPA. Less errors, very quick, can produce or can process items a lot quicker than a person. That being said, with COVID, with industries looking to become more streamlined, we're seeing an even more of an increase on those benefits, and we'll get into that in a sec here as well. And then lastly, get with it or get out of the way. You know, RPA is it's here to stay. There's RPA firms directly invested in this technology alone. We're seeing the industry grow. We're seeing people investing, organizations, large organizations are starting to invest in the technology. So now is the time to get involved. Now is the time to get ahead of the game and see the benefits of RPA. And then lastly there, we just have the three kind of big RPA platforms: UiPath, Blue Prism, and Automation Anywhere. So if you see these names pop up, just keep them in the back of your head. And with that, I'll actually pass it off to Andre from Blue Prism.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Yeah, so I thought what I would do is take a few minutes to just really give a perspective from Blue Prism on how RPA is evolving in the marketplace and really being leveraged more and more as a tool for digital transformation. So the first thing I want to talk about is intelligent automation. One of the things that, if you just go back one slide, if you don't mind, it's kind of, is to kind of, what we're seeing now in the marketplace and in the industry is sort of a convergence of a number of tools. So you have the basic RPA platform, which is then being combined or integrated with seamlessly with other smart technologies like AI, machine learning, and BI and analytics to get a much better value for organizations overall. This slide, Blue Prism did a survey at the beginning of 2021 with 6,000 executives worldwide. And what they came out with was a number of findings and what we call predictions here. So what we saw overwhelmingly is that executives are looking to leverage intelligent automation, RPA, to better meet customer demands, to enhance their brands in the marketplace, overall to become more innovative and competitive. And those that have already applied in some way RPA are looking to extend those capabilities out to the rest of the organization. If you can go ahead and go forward. We're seeing the same sort of predictions coming out of the industry analysts. Overwhelmingly, they're seeing the opportunity for tasks to be automated in a big way. They're also seeing automation become a real driver for digital transformation, not just a back office, but they're looking all across the organization to really transform the organizations. More and more organizations are applying the technology. Gartner's predicting 85% and above, and the market's still growing. So Forrester's pointing out a good growth is happening here and will continue at least till 2023, but certainly beyond that. Go ahead. We're also starting to see automation being applied as a corporate strategy within annual reports, which really, to me, means that they're really taking this seriously and bringing it above just a tactical initiative, but really applying it to how do they improve the business. The next slide. So Forrester at the beginning of 2021 had made a bold prediction, particularly with the onset of COVID and a lot of workers having to go remote, that 1 out of 4 workers would have some sort of automation applied to the work they do. Now, even more importantly, I think if you look down into what's in the yellow there, the concept of human in the loop is a much more important one in my perspective. I don't know if Forrester's prediction of 1 out of 4 has actually come true. I'm going to have to go look at that. But certainly what I'm seeing is the human in the loop concept is really the augmentation of human potential that is coming out of the RPA industry and intelligent automation is really where I think we're seeing a big uptick and where there's a lot of value being created. The next slide, please. So what does this look like from an organizational standpoint? So what we're seeing with the application of intelligent automation to the enterprise is that you can really break down the organization in sort of three buckets, if you will. One is people, the other one is the systems, and then the third one now that's coming in to reality is the digital workforce that is helping to serve as sort of the glue between the people and the systems, and to enable the people to be able to augment their skills and do things that they in the past could not do because they were tied down by a lot of kind of mundane tasks and things of that nature. So we're seeing an evolution in this way. Also, what we're saying with the adoption of our platform is sort of three waves of value. So the first wave, when people adopt our platform or RPA in general, they're looking for efficiency and productivity gains. But once they've achieved those things, they're starting to see applications that really can serve for business performance overall and improve how the business is performing in a global sense. And then after that, then it becomes to really looking at how can they transform the organization with automation to be able to add additional services or products or going into different streams of business. And then lastly, well, what does this look like in the future? Well, what we're seeing and more is sort of a connected enterprise where in the past there were disparate parts or silos within the organization. These are all being connected now through the use of intelligent automation, digital workers being able to move through systems seamlessly and really kind of improving a collective performance of an organization overall. So thank you. And on to Jesse now.
Thanks, Andre. Excuse me. So yeah, as we start to talk through the automation opportunities, certainly maximizing the digital workforce is key. And the number one thing to kind of kick off that is finding the right processes and tasks. So yeah, here at HS, we spent a lot of effort. Number one, educating all of our different key stakeholders. Starting with the leadership and executive sponsors down to the managers, down to the supervisors, down to the staff, on what digital workers can do, and effectively the notion that if, as a manager, you need to have a really good understanding that your team is both digital and staff. And so as we start to progress, understanding what humans can do and what bots can do is really important. Humans and bots, they both need to be trained. You have to have very clear, SOWs for humans, and you have to have very clear automations for digital workers. For human workers, naturally they're great at doing anything that's critical thinking and creative and looking at reports and analyzing things. Digital workers, on the other hand, are much better at the repetitive work that's kind of the more boring, less thought required kind of work. And I think as an organization goes through and prioritizes all of their different automations, taking a look at the high level processes and then zooming into the different automation opportunities that are typically the high volume ones is key. And as we go on to the next slide, we can talk through a few of the kind of scenarios that the digital workers work best in. So, working in Excel, opening up email and attachments, working in enterprise apps, database queries. It's you can integrate all of this into a single automation. Opening up files. So in some of our use cases, we have supply chain management forms that are processed, and the supply chain change management staff just dump a file into a folder, and all of a sudden they look and it got moved to a completed folder. And so there's lots of different ways to trigger automations, but we do have we have used files and folders as a mechanism. Certainly, you can have websites triggering automations, but the point is that there is ways to implement digital workers to be completely embedded in to Andre's point, in the human in the loop, where the humans are doing some work and then the digital worker takes off and enters it in potentially, and then that passes the torch and the baton back over to the human. Calculations, filling out forms, reading data from any real source, opening up any enterprise application, and then naturally updating disconnected systems. So we have quite a few different automation opportunities where we're syncing data from one system to another. extracting data, and then auditing data. So a lot of these running reports. Next slide, please. From a prioritization, picking the right automations, my firm belief is that that's the business's job. They know their business, let them just figure out what they want to automate. And so that's the model that we've adopted. We do have an education program for the departments. The department head basically becomes the executive sponsor of the automations in their department. They assign a RPA champion who collects a laundry list of automation opportunities, working with the managers and the leaders and the department, whoever basically has a really good idea, fills it into a consistent format. In our case, we have a pretty fancy Excel document that allows our finance team has over 50 automation opportunities identified, and supply chain management has, I think, 80 something plus, and allows you to actually see left across each of the automations, what's the return on investment? What's the payback period? And so ultimately, for the most part, the payback period is kind of the key differentiator, where we try and keep within 12 months. But that long laundry list gets then shortlisted to the ones that they want to proceed in the process. Those shortlisted automations get sent to the governance committee. Governance committee goes through, prioritizes them, and the ones that are supported move to the next process, which is the collection of the business requirements. Detailed steps of what this process is that the business wants us to automate. What's the business case? And then as soon as that's supported and documented, it goes straight to the development team. Next slide. So from a benefit realization perspective, which is really key, obviously picking the right automations, one of the key factors for most organizations is the return on investment and the payback period. And so coming into documenting and monitoring the program value to make sure that the program makes sense is key. Each of the different process areas, they're all investing time and effort, and so we do have the ability to actually track those, all of our different automations and the benefit that they're providing by department. Then we have the task level values. So each of the different, every piece of work that the automations do is recorded and audited. But the value of that is within the database. And to be frank, we just suck in each of the tasks that the automations do. In our case, is actually recorded. And then we have agreed upon values for how long it would have taken a human to do each of these tasks. So we take the tasks times the amount of time that the human would have taken to do it. And that gives us actually task level value recording, which we then sum up, and we provide real-time reporting that's updated every 6 hours, a dashboard that the business can look at and say, how many hours of capacity did these automations free up? And we've got a lot more elaborate reporting, but I think that having that capability, which is intrinsic to any type of RPA automation, is key, and it provides a lot of value because it shows and proves the value of the work that you're doing. Naturally, the business case is integral, and yeah, the capturing the I think we already talked through the rest, but certainly reporting and capturing the data is key. Next slide. Use cases, and naturally, going through and working with the business. A lot of times when you explain RPA, they're not going to get it, and or they'll think that a digital worker can do anything. And so, setting the context is important, but when you start to slide into the examples, they really do get it. And so oftentimes, I typically keep the what is RPA short and just jump to use cases. Hey, we could automatically scan invoices and input them into your financial system, or we could go through and check or provision access the second that someone does their training. So these are just some of the use cases that we've done that make a lot of sense for the organization, and but puts it into their own language and their own their own viewpoint. And so these kind of use cases are key, especially when presenting and talking about RPA. Next slide. Supply chain management. Again, we've got tons of examples where we're automating within supply chain management, and a lot of these things the supply chain management teams do, they're paper oriented, and they're taking data from source file and processing it, and then going through some type of validation and inputting it. And so for tasks that are simple and consistent and repeatable like that, like updating a price, a customer gets a new product and they want to add a price to the financial system. All of those things are audited, especially in our organization, because the impact of having a price that's not agreed to in the contract or potentially has an extra zero is significant on at the scale. And so all of those checks and balances are now actually automatically being done and being built into automations for a lot of our price updates and product descriptions and a lot of these things that we have thousands and thousands of SKUs, and maintaining that actually took a large group of resources. So yeah, we look forward to freeing up capacity in those areas soon.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I know that was a lot to fly through in a short time, and I just put a note in. Yes, we will be sending the slides out. You will get a link to the recording. But Matt and Andre and Jesse, thank you for a very thorough overview in a really quick time. Andrea, this begs the question, though, at least for me, when I hear about RPA, lots of great use cases there. How do you get started? So if you're an organization that's thinking about how do we start this, where do we go from here? And I think you just need to unmute and you'll be good to go.
Good to go. Okay. Thank you, Craig, and thank you so much for including me in the event today. We're excited about it because we've seen RPA deliver real tangible value to many organizations across all sectors, and we're thrilled to be here. So I'm going to break my answer into two parts, and speak to if you're starting from scratch. Where do you want, how and where to start? And then the second part is going to be, I'm going to speak to key success factors. How do you set yourself up for success so that you're, as you go to integrate and operationalize and scale, you're bringing the organization along the way that you intend to. So first thing is, it's not about the technology, it's more about how you use it. And so what companies often do, or organizations do, is they focus on the nuts and bolts of the technology, and they are very powerful technologies that deliver real value. However, what you want to do is start thinking about how work is done in your organization and how it can be improved. Can it be done faster, more efficiently, etc., and with fewer errors? And if you focus on that first and frame the business opportunities, you'll be on the right track. So the second element is start small. Can't overestimate this if you're literally starting from scratch as an organization. And there are sort of three legs to it. The first is what area of the company or what function or department. And as Matt and Jesse and Andre have highlighted in all of their information, there probably is not a part in any organization where there isn't at least some work that meets this workflow criteria. So you almost can't go wrong. What you might want to think about is where do you have an interest in a group of people who might be interested in actually embarking on the journey. The second leg is people, and that's who do you need to engage. And don't start with putting in big structures or an organization or practices in place. When you're starting from scratch, just pull together a small core team with some key contributors, as you can see on the slide, and then bring in and engage more of the organization as the initiative progresses. And last but not least, in terms of process, if it's the first process that you're starting, start with one that begins and ends within the control of the work group who's working on it. Because in that way, you're not also dealing with crossing different parts of the organization. Okay, next slide, please. So the third element is to use training to accelerate impact. Can't overemphasize this. More specifically, applied training, which is the kind of training that SAPE brings to the table. It will save you time. We've seen it save people time, money, and get you to value much sooner, as much as 6 months sooner, actually. It also gives people a common framework and a common language and gives them a foundation that they can continue to hone their skills after. We've done extensive research on training alternatives in the space. There's everything from free videos to tens of thousands of in-person training. And we see the sweet spot in the space where SATE is playing, and that is in applied training. And their training is world-class. and that is especially true in the digital space. The fourth element is to use RPA to weave conversations about innovation. I think Andre and Jesse and Matt probably all touched on this, is that RPA can be the gateway to digital transformation. So what you want to do right out of the gate is start weaving one-on-one conversations with each team member, not just team sessions and team conversations. You want to have one-on-one sessions with them to begin to shift their thinking and their expectations for innovation going forward. This will pay you dividends both near and longer term. And one of the things that we've also guide our clients on is to do a lot of one-on-one listening as well. There's nothing quite like really understanding where your people are at in order to move them to where you want them to be. So next slide. So those are the four elements to keep in mind so that you're starting in the right place and in the right way. Now I'd like to just touch on how to set up for success. What are the key success factors? So if you're starting to bring digital transformation into your business, really what you're doing is you're doing innovation using new tools, innovation using digital technology. So in our work, we use a classic innovation S-curve that plots value over time as a helpful reference. So based on our work, both with executive leadership and in the trenches, we've identified 5 key ingredients or key success factors that lead to success. And today we're only going to focus on the area over here on the left-hand side of the curve that's indicated by the orange shading, and that's the engaging and learning part of the exercise. As you can see, the different steps of innovation are plotted on the curve. So the first one, in terms of the first success factor, and that is one of the best predictors of success, is lies in the behavior of leaders. So in phase 1, if you are a leader or leading the group on the initiative, you need to be committed to engaging and learning yourself, walk the talk, and support the team doing the same, because that's the main value that you're going to get out of that stage of the endeavor. So next slide, please. So that's the first of the key success factors. Now, the S-curve on the previous slide, but with the orange curve, is what we call the classic innovation curve, and it's what you aim for as a leader. Most organizations, however, experience the blue curve, what you can see on the slide, and that's because innovation and driving change is not natural for many organizations, and it takes work. So your role as a leader is to take the steps that'll push that blue curve as close to the orange one as possible. And this is where our four other key success factors come in. So the second key success factors is you're going to hear as you go through training or get exposed to it, or maybe you've heard of it already, about agile project management or agile innovation, using that approach. One of the keys is to make sure that you need to help senior leadership and executive understand the agile methodology and the agile approach. And that's because if they don't understand the agile framework and instead are using what most leaders of today have been brought up in, which is the waterfall approach of planning and project management, there will be times where they will at some point doubt the veracity of the work if they don't understand the different framework, and they could end up delaying or stopping the development or progress of the initiative. So bring them into the fold, help them understand what it is. The third key success factor is to use project facilitation as opposed to conventional project management. And that's because collaborative facilitation creates greater engagement and ownership, and actually creates real momentum for that broader digital transformation that the other panelists have been speaking about in the first section of the webinar. The fourth item is bring what we call adjacent contributors into the fold. And what we mean by adjacent contributors is you've got your core team and key contributors, and start to bring in people from adjacent functions or departments and ask them to sit in on meetings, bring their expertise, share questions and ideas, and at different parts through the process. If you do that, then as the initiative progresses, those same contributors will become your advocates in the organization down the road for broader implementation. And last but not least is ensure that you have a clear line of sight to value. in terms of return on investment, payback, et cetera, and that everyone involved understands that. Because if you don't, sometimes it can be perceived as busyness in the organization as opposed to business. So just want to wrap up with just by saying that that robotic process automation can deliver incredible returns in value, anywhere from a 4x to a 20x. But the real value in addition to that is that you're freeing your human workers to do much higher value added work and tap into more of their expertise to create more value for the organization. So that's it, Craig. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Andrea. Really interesting there. Folks, I'm going to throw the panel for a loop here, potentially. Those of you on the line with us today, if you're comfortable and your company has started down the road of RPA projects, anything like that, perhaps share that in the chat. Let us know where you're at, what's going on, what's worked well, what hasn't, and and we'll carry on with the Q&A here, because Andrea, you touched on an important piece there, and that is the human aspect. And so I guess that brings around to the question of what human skills that you need and what talent that you need to make this happen. And Andre, maybe you can tackle this one for us. Is what talent does an organization really need to be investing in or developing to make RPA successful?
Yeah, I'll start kind of at a high level, and maybe my friend Jesse he's got some detail around that. And so what the nice thing about RPA, the way it was designed, and Blue Prism was a founding company around developing RPA, was really to ensure that process improvements through systems can be done without having to do coding. To go to software developers or hire on a bunch of IT people to be able to kind of build these automations. So it's really built for business people to be able to go in and actually build automations. So in terms of talent, it comes from a variety of levels, but I think what people really are good at building automations in RPA is if they have a good kind of business analytics sense, able to understand how processes work. I think that to me is a fundamental skill. The training is fairly quick to be able to get up to speed and to build automation. So I don't like to kind of pigeonhole and say this is what you need to have these sort of skill sets. And we're seeing it come from all sorts of walks of life within organizations. So that's sort of the experience from my perspective. But Jesse or others, if you have deeper dives, you can certainly contribute there.
Sure. Yeah, a couple quick comments is I think a strong leader in the team, and secondly, leadership on the executive sponsorship side. The sponsor really makes or breaks it. So choosing someone who's reporting directly to the CEO, I think is key, or at that level. And then enacting a culture of hey, we open, transparent, challenging, kind of that risk tolerant, fail faster kind of mentality, and making sure that when you fail, nobody's getting in trouble here. We're just going to learn and move on. The BA kind of and software development skill sets are certainly valuable, but to your point, Andre, like we have one of our the team members in our team. She has a networking background, and within a month she was developing automations, and clearly I think hiring smart people that can quickly and be agile is key. Change management influencers, and I don't mean like social media influencing. I mean like people that can actually work with business owners and work with department heads, and inevitably you're going to always have a bit of friction, and working with everyone, pulling everyone together, and kind of getting these automations passed. It does take a bit of perseverance, but being steadfast is key. And then there's the techie stuff, the IT server, database kind of stuff, skill sets, which typically you can reach out to other teams to leverage that and pull them into make a virtual team. Students, I would add too, is that there's tons of programs, and ultimately hiring students and actually getting them to be productive RPA developers has worked really well for us. And having this training, having the ability to actually get training from organizations like we're talking about, it can really help speed up your program, and bringing in internal resources and getting them trained up. And it's certainly is not difficult, but you have to be thoughtful about it for sure.
For me, it's interesting. I think, folks hear this phrase RPA and they immediately go to the tech skill needed, and they look at their organization and they say, well, we may or may not have it. And then they hear what's going on in Calgary right now. And, it's, fighting tooth and nail for every tech worker that's available. But I love the way that you've both kind of focused on making sure you've got your mindsets right and your executive sponsorship. That is in any upskilling or reskilling or change initiative. If you don't have that in place, you're not going to be able to move it forward. So if you think about, and Dana and Bob and Andy, thank you for your comments in there in the chat. There's some really interesting examples here. And I know there's some questions. We will make sure we leave time for those at the end. Laura's monitoring that. But we figured out where to start. We figured out what talent we need. Can we speak a little bit to, okay, we've got this in place now, how do we scale it? Right? What's next there? And, I think Andre and Jesse, you were going to potentially tackle this, and certainly others feel free to jump in. And, Andrea and Matt, if there's anything that you want to add to the prior comments, please let me know. So, but how do we scale this? Right? Let's assume we got it right. It's going well. Okay, let's ramp it up, folks. What's next?
I'm happy to start out with this. I come from a delivery background. I've been delivered some very large programs over the years. So I'm really biased about using the proper methodology. And there's, what we call the robotic operating model that we provide. Other vendors, I'm sure, provide their own flavor of that. But I think it's very important that you adopt from the get-go the proper methodology in order for you to scale. And that gives you kind of a 360 view of how to put together these programs. And as you mature and as you scale, what you need to do and how do you need to manage the change in the organization. Jesse at AHS has done a fabulous job with that, and his team is scaling at unprecedented levels that I've seen throughout public sector here in Canada. So, kudos to Jesse and being able to do that. But I think he, from the very beginning, started with the principle, I've got this robotic operating model that's already been pre-built. Let's use it and apply it. And, there may be some tweaks and things here and there, but fundamentally those best practices are already there for you to leverage. So that's my bias, and I've seen it work. And those that follow a solid operating model are the ones that are successful and scale faster and quicker and get the most benefit out of it.
To add a couple of thoughts is, to Andre's point, leveraging others' experience, and in that, same measure goes the ROM, which does have, there's 100 documents that I literally went through all of them and kind of formulated them to actually AHS-ize them and had a bit of context for the AHS kind of. We always like to add our own language, but the foundations of it is consistent, and it's something everyone has access to, and it's free. And secondly, meeting with others, networking, figuring out what's working, what's not working. In the beginning, we were kind of talking about a federated model, and shifted gears to kind of focusing more on the centralized after talking to all 20, 30 different automation COEs, and realizing that, hey, everyone is starting centralized. So why would we go decentralized, start kicking it off? Support it. If you want to scale it, you need a vision, and you got to have those goalposts. What does success look like in a year? And in our case, we literally were developing for about 10 months, and then the question started being percolating. What is success for this year? And we didn't know, and so we went back to the visioning steps, and actually got that completed, and finally have now an approved vision and a mission, which is nice, along with goals. And I think one other quick point is go get seed funding. Start small, realize some benefit, prove it, and then increase and then scale. A lot of teams, I find they kind of jump into it. The expectations are set super high, and then all of a sudden you got a big team, and maybe the performance isn't there. But I find if you're constrained financially or with resources, it does actually prove valuable, because it makes sure that you're focusing on the right things. So at least for us, that did work. And I guess, a bias toward action. And a lot of operational teams are going to work with, and they'll say, oh, we can do this automation in system, or we can do it using this technology. Okay, cool, but like, can you do it in like maybe 6 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever the number is? And if you can't do it in weeks, then maybe we should be looking at using RPA or using other these kinds of automation technologies. And so yeah, we've had automations that had in-system capabilities, but the decision was go to with RPA because it was faster, and we could get people freed up right now. So yeah, that's the thought.
Very good. Matt, I'm going to kind of turn to you here too, because I think this whole concept of how do you build digital workers kind of plays into this scaling question. I wonder if you can kind of comment on that, right? Talking about low code, no code kind of options and so on. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. And then we can hop into some Q&A.
Definitely. Yeah, great question. We've kind of touched on this throughout this kind of session, and there's a big emphasis on the technology and how do we implement it, who do we bring on to help with scaling. And it really, RPA is just that, where it's low code or almost no code, and that's one of the benefits to it. You don't need a computer science degree. You don't need to have really in-depth coding experience to be able to build these processes. That being said, I think to Andrea's point previously, which is it's not so much about the technology, but how you use it is really how you can really build good digital workers, is understanding how to select a good RPA process, what goes in with that, and having the staff to support that first proof of concept process, and making sure that you're bringing the right people on, you're training the right people, and in what areas they need to learn, and you're building a process pipeline. You want to build up a big queue of potential processes, be able to evaluate all these processes and really pick the best ones so that you're seeing the benefits, so that you can go to the executives with this proof of concept and show what you've done, and you can communicate RPA to other areas of the organization. And people get really worked up on the technical side of, well, how do we build this process? And building the RPA process is one portion of the whole overall goal. And that's what also we're teaching at the SAIT bootcamp, the SAIT RPA bootcamp, is not only are they getting the technical skills of learning Blue Prism, of how they actually build this process, but they're also learning up how to stand up a successful RPA practice in an organization, which I think is something very valuable. And there's a lot that goes into that. And when you have panelists here like Jesse, who's done just that and been able to be successful with standing up RPA, it's great to see. But again, just back to the original question of how do we build digital workers? Well, it's getting the right people involved. It's building that small circle, getting the right technology, whether that's Blue Prism or another platform, and making sure that you pick that right proof of concept, that initial process, and then you kind of go from there, and then you can kind of start scaling, like Jesse and Andre had just spoken to.
Perfect. So, even though it's RPA, it's very similar to starting initiatives in any sort of area, right? Start small, figure it out, know what works, and then move from there. So I want to thank you all. There's a number of questions and comments in the chat here. We may not have time to get to all of them, but I've been chatting with Laura here on the side. We will commit to making sure that we get answers out to everybody one way or the other. So Laura, I know you've been behind the screen there, but there you are now. Why don't you, there's some really great questions here, and Shannon, thank you for your comment in the chat, and Carlos as well. Why don't you, let's start trying to tackle some of these questions, and I'll let you flag the ones there for you.
Thanks, Craig. And I just wanted to let everyone know we will send out a communication after with recording, and we'll work on getting a blog post or some sort of communication out on the questions that we don't have time to answer. So please know that we're committed to trying to get answers to everybody's questions. But maybe I'll just flag a couple here for the panelists. So Shannon has asked, one of the challenges we have experienced is how to quantify and then balance workforce impacts where redundancy is created. So I'm curious to the panel, how have you moved through these challenges? Maybe Jesse, I'll pick on you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I was responding to Melissa's chat. I'll be honest.
Busted.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
Shannon was asking about how do you qualify and then balance workforce impacts when redundancy is created? And so have you moved through this challenge when there's been, I guess, duplication of work efforts between the bots and humans?
Sure. And I guess the short answer is, and frankly, I was just texting this to Melissa, but which is a great question, Melissa. I'll get to it. In AHS, we have literally 80% of our positions are filled. We have a 20% vacancy rate right now in our positions. So we're missing 20% of our staffing. That would be norm. And so the short answer is I haven't seen any. And the reason is because in all the teams that we're working with to automate the work or help them to free up capacity using automation, they've got more demand than they can actually handle. And so, we're basically augmenting their teams, which allows them to do a better job, get their work done better, increase quality. But we haven't seen staffing reductions at all. There might be some impact from a vacancy budget perspective, but it's not impacting the people. Yeah, we have 127,000 people, or whatever the number is that work for us. The tens or hundreds that we will free up through automation, and potentially even whatever the number is. It's not impacting the total staff count. Yeah, we just need too many people right now in healthcare, simply.
Yeah, it's it's an interesting conundrum. I have another question here from Sanjay. So curious, what is the role of AI and RPA? And secondly, do existing software tools in the organization need to be upgraded to incorporate RPA? So maybe Andrea, I'll pick on you for this one.
Okay, thank you, Laura. First of all, terrific question, right? Because different organizations are sort of exposed to RPA at different times in their journey, kind of thing. So your first question, the question was about the role of AI in RPA. What we have found is that organizations who start with RPA, because as Matt shared, RPA is rules-based, right? So as you're going through processes that are governed by rules that you can define in advance and train the bots to follow, those are the kinds of processes that it's conducive for. What happens is often within organizations is those types of processes are automated, and then you end up with exceptions that sometimes at the early stage you have people dealing with them, right? With the exceptions where some intelligence needs to be applied or some judgment. And that's where companies like Blue Prism is one of the leaders in the automation space. Companies like them are starting to layer in artificial intelligence and machine learning to help address those exceptions. So in essence, it's RPA plus, and it's graduating to a higher capability to take on more of those tasks. The second question was around software tools in the organization currently, I think, and incorporating RPA, and absolutely you can. It's even if you're starting from the viewpoint of you're already using machine learning, the other or artificial intelligence or other tools, those tools in some cases, in order to automate, in the past, you would have had to do projects where you did significant code development, et cetera. Whereas now you can basically bolt on RPA to them and have them automate those sort of lower value or less demanding tasks, because you don't need in some cases, you don't need the other tools in order to address them. So you can bolt them together and take the sort of the basic rules-based automation and have RPA do the work for it. So I hope that answers it a bit.
I might actually just add something on there, Andrea. Yeah, another benefit to RPA is if you have these legacy systems that are older, you don't need to go through and update all these applications in your organization. You actually can utilize RPA to manipulate that legacy system, that old application, to now give you the output that you want. You might have some old application that you're not really seeing the benefits. It's not really doing much for you. So what do? You build a robotic process automation that interacts with this application, and now you're getting an output that is beneficial to you, and you can utilize and you can transfer that data to other applications. So you don't need to do all this upgrading in your organization with your applications and your infrastructure to make it so you can use this RPA software. That's one of the biggest benefits, is you can just kind of plug and play, and it's made to utilize those old legacy systems. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. Thanks, Matthew. I'm also going to pick on you while you're unmuted. So we had a question around RPA being appropriate for smaller organizations. So I know you've had some experience, especially with your user group and some of the folks that you're working with in the industry. Can you speak to, the benefits of RPA across different sizes of organizations?
For sure. Yeah, great question. It's not all about enterprise-wide RPA processes. There can be smaller businesses that get involved with this a lot as well. And that was kind of to a point earlier of RPA kind of works in tangent with coworkers and employees. You can be a small business owner, and you can have an RPA application on your desktop, and you can start a process when you go home from work that, submits your invoices or whatever that process may be. And you come into the morning and your bot has given you a report of what it's done. And that's an idea of a really small scale RPA process. But starting there, you're seeing time savings for yourself. You're seeing more productivity with this process, and then you get an idea of what RPA can do, and you start kind of growing from there. So yeah, I think there maybe is a bit of a stigma of, RPA needs to be a enterprise-wide solution, but that's certainly not the case. And in actual fact, at the end of the RPA lifecycle, it gets to what we call citizen development, which is where individual employees are actually using the RPA software and kind of developing their own processes on their own desktops. So it kind of comes full circle of, sure, it starts small and then it gets big, but then at the end game, it's kind of coming back to everyone getting involved with RPA, and really everyone's seeing the individual benefits as well as enterprise-wide benefits. So.
For sure. Thanks, Matt. I'm going to just kind of lump together a couple of questions relative to the use cases in different industries. So we had a question around education use cases, and also, if I could call on everybody to speak to where you've seen RPA work really well and what you've seen that doesn't work. Where you see some of the pitfalls. And we've got few minutes left, and maybe I'll just call on each of you to kind of just give your thoughts on some of the best applications and different applications, and then what's worked and what hasn't.
I could jump in on the learning one briefly. So yeah, I've done a ton of learning automation, learning reporting, learning automated emails. I've done a few automations that basically took the learning that was completed and automatically provisioned access in Oracle Financials. That's a few use cases, but yeah, there's definitely a ton, especially in. We've got one automation that we're doing that basically looks at new courses that are actually scheduled, automatically creates a Zoom link, and then emails the participants of that course the Zoom link with a pre-formatted kind of background email. But those are a few that come to mind. Yeah.
Yeah. I think typically we see RPA start up in, finance departments is kind of where we see it reside. And so I think that reason because of that is there's a lot of really great processes in finance and accounting that can be automated right off the bat. A lot of that is quick data migration between applications. And that's something that is really, really good to have automated and can be quickly automated. There's a quick turnaround. You see good ROI on that. But Jesse had touched on kind of all the areas of where you can automate processes, supply chain, human resources, payroll, and education, onboarding students and employees. And, there's so many different areas. So I think the biggest ones to focus on are really the supply chain and the finance areas. I think are your quick wins right there. Areas that would provide pitfalls, you know, I don't think there's a specific area that's you want to avoid. I think it's more that process, you know, whether that process is rule-based, you know, does it have a lot of applications involved? Are these applications being upgraded every month? Because now your RPA process has to be upgraded every month. So it's not a specific area that is to avoid. I think it's more specific processes per se, and those processes would have a lot of decisions that humans need to make, a lot of gray area where the bot can't do that. So I think that's where you need to avoid. And I think understanding how to implement RPA successfully and what makes a good RPA process is really going to help you avoid that.
Yeah, one quick point on that. Matt's rock on. I think any process can be automated. There are certainly a couple more difficult ones in the context of scale. Apologies for the dog. I think the mailman's walking by. But we've got one automation that comes to mind where we've got literally 300 people. There's about 10 offices, 26 different teams. And so automating a process that is used and shared by 26 different teams, you're going to see differences. And so, you know, we're automating quite a few of the different processes in that team, and coordinating and consolidating that process is the only kind of complexity piece that might be a barrier. And in our case, we're working through it, and the automation has pretty significant benefit because there's so many people that are doing it. But that's the only, there's just, you know, potentially some easier or less easy ones, but they can all be done. Yeah.
Hi. One of the, in terms of where they can be used or where it works well, just to build on what Matt and Jesse have already shared, is without a doubt within finance, there is a lot there. And in basically every industry that we've had the opportunity to work with, finance, that area applies, because as Matt said, they have a lot of processes where they're moving data across the board. Rather than going into the specifics of each one of the common thread is that often it's where they need to move data from one system to another system is often where it works, because typically your alternative there is to build software that can bridge it. And that's where RPA really shines, because it's not about building complicated encoded software. You bring RPA in and it bridges. It takes information from one system and moves it to another one just like that. So then, we've seen it, we've been using it, or our clients have been, in production accounting in oil and gas, in field operations in different industries, and in measurement and a whole host of things. In terms of pitfalls, one of the main pitfalls that we've learned is sort of not separate, not associated with a particular part of the organization. But one of the things you want to make sure of is that the subject matter experts that you're bringing in to work on it, make sure that they understand the how and the why they're doing the process the way they are. So you want to make sure that the people, their subject matter experts, different people do jobs different ways, right? And not the ones who just check off the boxes. Because if your subject matter expert is someone who understands that, then actually they start to identify better ways to do it and automate it at the same time. So that's one of the things that we've seen is really important. That's it.
Andre, do you have a final thought on that one? The use cases, the pitfalls?
The only thing, I mean, very comprehensive in terms of what the other panelists have said. The only thing that I would try to remind folks is most platforms like ours will have tools that you can use to help you analyze and diagnose whether a process is really good or viable, or what it will take to automate. So it's not like you have to kind of figure it out on your own. There's ready-made tools within, I know our platform, I'm sure there are in others, that really help you kind of do the analysis. You can even get into some deeper aspects with process and task mining, which Jesse's team is starting to get into, where you can really look at the power of those kind of tools. But right out of the gate, you'll have some tools that can help you really identify and hone in on the right kinds of processes to automate, and those that you should stay away from, quite frankly. So.
Well, that brings us to time. I want to thank this panel. You know, I've learned a ton just chatting with you over the last couple of weeks and getting ready for this and then today. So Andrea, Andre, Jesse, and Matt, thank you very much. Laura, thank you for your very adept moderating skills. And Leanne, I know we didn't hear you, but we know we couldn't have made this happen this morning without it, without your help. So we will get out a link to the recording, the slide deck, etc. We will make sure we get the questions answered that we couldn't get to. But thank you very much, everybody. It was great to participate here with you, and thank you for joining us online this morning. Have a great day and try and stay warm out there today. It looks gross. So anyway, take care, everybody.